Hello, and welcome to another Talk Within the Nine-Sided Circle, coming to you from beautiful downtown planet Earth, the place, the plague spot of the galaxy. Used to be the party spot of the galaxy, but not no more. Which brings us to our topic tonight. But before we do that, I will tell you a few things. First of all, Noor Kyle is not going to be joining us tonight. She made me give her the night off so that she can actually get other things done. I only make her work 51 weeks out of the year, not 52. So this is her week off. And if you are new here, let me suggest to you, and it's only a suggestion, but it's a good suggestion that if you are watching this on YouTube, that you look down there and push that subscribe button so that you can be subscribed to us. But what won't do you any particular good, but it's great for us. But if you push the little bell button, it will do you some good because you'll get notifications every time we put a video up, which is, at least once a week. And let me welcome you as well if you are new here. And tonight, the topic is fear. I should do that. Fear. Because all sorts of people are really, really afraid right now, and they don't know why or how or what to do with it. And so we're getting this crazy panic behavior. Don't worry, that's not the coronavirus. I have a chronic cough from an event that happened to me a few years back. And you'll hear me cough, but it ain't because I'm dying of the illness. So, fear. What is fear? This is not a rhetorical question. What do you guys think? What is fear? Don't all answer at once. Fear is nope. Nobody?
Okay, I'll take a crack at it.
Thank you.
The feeling that something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, or perhaps something bad could happen. That's a decent definition. And Brian says an addiction, sometimes in various different ways. So you're walking down the street and a large slavering dog starts barking at you from a close distance and behaving in a very threatening manner. His hackles are up and he's growling and there's teeth and saliva going everywhere. And you experience fear. And then the next day, you think about going to the beach and swimming, and it happens to be that you're afraid of water and you experience the same fear. Are these the same exact fears? What's going on between these two?
Degree of immediacy.
Yeah, and yet thinking about going to the beach, you have the same experience as you had with the dog barking at you.
I would say one's based on the reality that that person's mind has created, and the other is on the reality of what the dog has created.
Yeah. One is definitely circumstantial. The dog is circumstantial. You have a large fanged creature threatening you. The other is not circumstantial because you're not even at the beach yet. And if you get to the beach, you don't have to go into the water. And yet you're experiencing all of the same physical sensations. So, fear is useful. You should not get rid of it. I know a lot of people say, learn to release your fears and let go of your fears and all like that. And I would not want to do that for a number of reasons. One, if that dog is barking at me, I want some adrenaline in my system. I want to have, all of my fear responses up, because those are what would allow me to more effectively cope with that dog if he attacks than if I'm just being all mellow and not doing anything. On the other hand, if I let that fear freeze me and the dog attacks and I don't do anything, then that fear has become my enemy. Does that make sense to you? Yes, no, maybe?
Mostly. I mean, the freeze response is a very old one. I mean, shared with a lot of animals. It might be good for something.
It's definitely good if you were a fawn with really good protective coloration
Hmm.
and a coyote is prowling around. If you freeze, there is less chance of him seeing you. The dog has already seen you. Freezing won't do you any good.
Hmm. It might make you less interesting.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah. But on the whole, I agree it's not usually the best.
No, nor is running away. Because if you turn and run from a dog, you trigger their prey response. They will decide that, oh, you are food and you're trying to get away, and they'll chase you. Nine
And you
times out
aren't
of 10.
likely to be faster than the dog.
No, you are not going to be faster than the dog over a short distance. Dogs can outrun you for the first 100 yards. And unless you are really, really well trained in fighting dogs, you don't want to attack the thing. So all of your fear responses, all of the standard programmed responses are ineffective in a case like that. So what do you do? So let's, yes, say no.
We can breathe.
Yes, breathing is very important, because usually if you're experiencing a fear response, you're holding your breath or you're breathing very, very unhealthily. That breathing will help get you back into your thinking mind, because the thing about fear, in the blurb that I wrote up for this, I quoted the Bene Gesserit litany against fear as it appears in the Dune novels, which starts out with fear is the mind killer. And this is exactly true. Fear, when it operates on its own, shuts off all of your higher functions. And in a lot of cases, your higher functions can actually be incredibly useful to you. Now, if you could shut off your panic, what would you do about the dog? Any ideas?
I have an idea. I'm not sure it's a good one.
What's that?
Tell the owner I'm a lawyer.
We're assuming that the owner isn't there.
Oh, in that case,
Yeah, there's you and the dog.
Gotta find a way to calm him.
Maybe. How would you do that? Any ideas? How would you calm that dog? Okay, so if you can break the cycle of reacting from fear, you can use a little logic and go to yourself, well, what is upsetting this dog? And the answer is, I'm too close to him. Every animal has its personal space, and if you invade that, you run the risk of setting them off. And this is such a true thing that we actually know the personal spaces of many, many animals. Like for the elephant seal, the personal space of an elephant seal is 300 feet. If you get within 300 feet of an elephant seal, he's going to start looking at you like you're invading his territory. If you get 30 feet, he's probably going to attack you. If I'm remembering this correctly. It's been a while since I've hung out with elephant seals.
I was thinking back away slowly.
Backing away slowly is a wise thing to do. What else can you do at the same time? What do you know about dogs? Not much. So, did you know that if you look directly into a dog's eye, it is usually perceived as a challenge? Especially if you don't know the dog? So, if you don't want to tip a dog over into an attack behavior, you don't want to look directly in his eye. But you don't necessarily want to be all submissive either. So you look off to the side of them. But at the same time, you can keep your body tall, you know, presenting a larger presence to them. You can use your voice. Dogs do not understand a lot of words, but they understand every change in tone that you have. So if I was dealing with this, I would talk to the dog in a very soft, slightly high voice. High in that I'd raise it about like this and go, oh, what a good dog. You're okay. And that might relax them a little bit. If they start moving forward, you drop the pitch of your voice and put a little growl into it and tell them to back off, which is the same behavior that they would do to you. All of these things are things that you can do if you can think to do them. And the thing about fear is that it turns your mind off. So here's a question for all of you. What are you afraid of? And Brian says, sing to it. Sing to it might work. Depends on whether you're singing a nice, mellow, hippie folk song or you've gone death metal. So, what are you afraid of? Zoha, what is one of your fears? You don't have to tell us the biggest one, but something that actually makes you afraid. You know, like heights, water, driving in heavy traffic, any of that stuff.
Wildlife, I think.
Wildlife?
Yeah.
Well, you're in Australia. That actually makes sense. Everything wants to kill you.
Yeah. And I think I don't have much knowledge of it. So it
Uh-huh.
brings more fear to me. Unfortunately.
Okay. And you're in Melbourne, right?
Yes.
You know that there's an incredibly good wild animal park right outside of town.
I've heard and I haven't been.
Yeah, I have. Isn't that crazy? You haven't been and I have. I spent
Yes.
the whole day there. I loved it.
I've heard it's really good.
It is. It's very, very good. So
Yes.
if I had a fear of wildlife, I would be going to that park at least once a month and
I
practicing
think. Mhm.
being calm, not turning off my fear, but just letting the fear be there and not let it stop me.
I think my fear is dealing with wild animals.
Yeah, this would give you an opportunity to do that. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
going into the serpent house there, and there were all of these brown snakes in this little pit, right? I experienced some
Yes.
fear because I know how poisonous those guys are, but they were being all mellow, and there was a guy there with a snake hook and everything. So, uh, you know, I
Yeah.
let myself be slightly afraid, which kept me very, very alert to everything that the snakes were doing.
Mm.
But I didn't let it force me out of the house or lock me up or make me irrational.
Hmm. I'll do that.
Yeah, so this is one of my ways of dealing with fear is inoculating yourself against it, which is put yourself in positions where you actually experience some fear but are still safe. Like if you have a fear of heights, you can go up to a high place and stand there, you know, behind a barrier where you are physically safe and experience what the fear does to you. And you can change it.
That's a very good idea.
Yeah. And it's a great wild animal park. It's one of the best I've ever been to tell you the truth. So,
Extra reason to go.
yep. Mustaqim, how about you? Do you have any particular fears? I mean, you already conquered the biggest one.
I think I have a fear flight, 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 flight,
What? Fighting?
airplane.
Okay. You know, if I heard you correctly, okay, flight as in airplanes. Um, yeah, first couple of times I flew, I had a fear of flying too. And um, for me, the thing that I did to get myself through that is I just did my breathing practice. Actually, the first time I flew, I was probably 5 and I had no fear of flying at all, even though it was a much less comfortable experience in many ways than it is now because it was in one of those prop planes, big old prop planes. Had 4 propellers and was really loud and scary and definitely had more vibrations to it and everything, but I never noticed it. But so fear is a response. Can you all remember what it feels like in your body when you feel fear? I know for me, I get it right in the diaphragm, right below the ribs, and it goes up my chest. And I go, and so everybody's not going to be the same in what they feel, but everybody will have a specific thing that they feel. And in order to deal with your fear, you want to do a couple of things. The first is that you want to exhale. Not inhale, but exhale. If you find yourself feeling that fear, exhale. And you do that 2 or 3 times. You concentrate on the exhale. That will lower the sensation of fear a little bit. And then you have to ask yourself, is this fear rational? If the fear is rational, you have to treat it one way. If the fear is irrational, you have to treat it a different way. If it's a rational fear, you look for the energy that's in your body and you let it be there, because fear creates energy. Fear creates a whole cascade of hormones. You've got adrenaline going on, you have cortisol being released, you have all of these things that prepare you for running away or fighting off something dangerous. And if it's a rational fear, you want some of that. If it's an irrational fear, you take a slightly different tact. You want to allow the feeling of fear to calm down some, but not all. Because you still want the energy. So if you have a fear of, say, swimming in the water, you want enough energy to keep you alert and aware, especially if you're learning to swim. Let's say you go to a pool and you go, I got to learn to swim. And you tell the instructor that you have a terrible fear of water and you got to learn to swim anyway. And if it's a good instructor, they will take you through in easy steps. And you allow yourself to accomplish the steps. One of the best things to do with fear is chunk things down, one step at a time. Put your feet in the water. Stand on the bottom of the pool. Let yourself float. You know, this sort of thing. And a little bit of fear is a good thing in a situation like that. Now, when I was younger, I used to do a fair amount of sparring. And there is not a time that I can think of, pretty sure, where I didn't experience some moments of fear getting on the mat with whoever I was going to spar with. And I never tried to stop the fear. I just didn't let it stop me. So either the fear stops you, or you use it to give you the energy you need to do the task. And that's the biggest thing about fear, is that you need to turn fear into energy. And who here knows what I'm going to tell them that they have to do in order to do that? Come on, it should be obvious by now. Don't make me say it first.
Breathe.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Your breath is your interface with your autonomic nervous system, because breathing is both conscious and unconscious. So if you breathe consciously, you can begin to take control of I'll get to your question in a second, Brian. With your breath, you can begin to retake control of your physical being. And that doesn't mean the fear will go away, but with proper breathing technique and proper meditative technique, you can let yourself continue even with the fear. Now, Brian asks, what percent of daily fear is irrational versus rational on average? And damned if I know. I think that is so contingent on so many variables. So I used to live in Tanzania, which is a country in East Africa. And I experienced a lot more fear there than I do where I'm living now. Most of that was rational fear, because being an Anglo who was pretty well off, I was a target for thieves way more than an African who had nothing. Nobody wants to rob the guy who has nothing in his pockets. They want to rob the guy who looks at least like they have money on them. So I could have done what most tourists do there, which is hide in the well-guarded tourist hotels and never go out. And Ilmar just arrived. Hello, Ilmar. And only be chauffeured around in air-conditioned buses and stuff from place to place. And I would have missed out on everything. And I would have let my fear win. What is that behind your head, Ilmar?
It's a fearful cat about to attack me.
Aha. He's going to eat your head.
He is. Look at him.
I'm looking at that. I see you found a way to put up a background. Good for you.
I did indeed. Inspired by yours.
Excellent. I like the giant cat. So we are, of course, talking about fear, something that you are well acquainted with.
Indeed, I am.
Yes, I mean, you hold the dubious distinction of actually having been chased by Nazis. So,
and by the Bolsheviks.
And by the Bolsheviks too. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that would scare the crap out of me.
It probably scared the crap out of me too, but I think I had diapers on at the time, so it wasn't my problem.
So we were talking about percentage of fear, rational versus irrational. In Tanzania, it would have been irrational to think that everything was dangerous and all of the Africans were out to get me. That would have been utterly irrational. It would be rational to say, I have to take a little bit more caution in what I'm doing in order to keep myself safe. Which is what I did. And instead of living in a big expat hotel with armed guards all around the perimeter, I lived literally in the center of town and walked to work every day, which was about a mile each way and all of that. But I never let my guard down. But I did make a point of making friends with lots and lots of people along the way. And it's amazing how much that eases fears.
How about conditional rational?
Give
There's some,
give me an example.
well, based on the place you've grown up, certain things are bring more fear for you. Like security has different meanings for different cities and neighborhoods, and
Oh, absolutely.
for that, fear also means it's a different rationale as well.
Yep. And that gets into rational fears. A rational fear, if you are living in the slums of Rio de Janeiro, would be an absolutely irrational fear if you were living in Beverly Hills.
Yes.
So, coping with fear. In either event, whether it's a rational or an irrational fear, the first thing you want to do is get control of your breath. And there's a very specific way that you do this, and we're all going to do it now. I'm going to invite you to do this with me, which is sit here and then just let your chest relax for a moment, and then exhale. And exhale using your abdominal muscles. Squeeze your navel towards your spine. And then relax. Let the air come in and then exhale again. So you're concentrating on the exhale. Every breath that you take like that is going to calm the panic parts of your mind down. And what you want is to get the reactivity of the fear. I forget who coined the term fear reactivity, but it's a good one. But you want to get the fear reactivity down to a point where you can allow your conscious mind and your rational mind to re-engage. This is absolutely necessary to the control of fear and using fear as fuel rather than as an impediment to actually surviving. So here's a term for you: fear as fuel. What do you think that means? Hopefully by this point in the talk, it should be fairly obvious. No?
Well, I would assume that you're talking about building up energy, which instead of channeling it to fear, then you can channel to more productive areas. But then again, I missed the first part of the talk, so you may be completely on a different line here.
No, that's pretty close. That's pretty close to what I'm talking about. Fear, using your fear as fuel can give you the energy to deal with the situation appropriately. And that's what you need to do. Alfred Korzybski, the guy who founded General Semantics, postulated this thing that he called the cortical thalamic pause. He said that when certain heavy emotions begin to happen, your thalamus takes over, your lizard brain. The limbic system takes over the reactions, because when you're afraid, you go right into lizard brain mode. Fight or flight, survival. And he suggested that there are techniques, of which that breathing technique is one, that cause you to pause that thalamic response, allowing your your cortex and your neocortex to come back online so that you can choose a rational response to your fear.
But it needs to be trained, no? Because on the fear environment, the automatic response is that's not the automatic response.
In a fearful environment, your automatic response is going to be whatever you tend to do when you're afraid: run away, attack it, freeze and not be able to do anything, all like that. And you want to avoid that and be able to make choices about what you're going to do based on what is rather than what you're afraid might be. Does that
So
make
you
sense?
so you have to train it like in the environment where the fear is almost close to the fear itself.
Yeah, or you can bring up fear in your mind right now. If you can think of some situation where you were really afraid, you'll start feeling that fear again. It won't be as strong, but it'll be there. You don't want it to be as strong, because if it's as strong as in the actual situation, it might be too strong for you. So let's look at a concrete example, which is the coronavirus pandemic that we're all experiencing right now. This is generating huge amounts of fear. I was in a store with a whole bunch of people today, and they all had looks on their faces like, oh my God, we're all going to die. And because of that, they're doing stupid things. Nobody needs a year's worth of toilet paper to get them through this pandemic. Buying that much toilet paper is utterly irrational. Nobody needs to hoard 100 bottles of hand sanitizer. But because none of these people that I saw today knew how to deal with their fear, that's the kind of thing that happens. And it gets handed down. There was a father and son in the store, and they were by me several times. As a matter of fact, I had to growl at them once or twice because they started really infringing on my space because they were so panicky. And the father, the entire time, was carrying on this monologue with his kid, explaining to him exactly why they had to be afraid and how they had to be afraid and what they had to do to protect themselves. And getting a chance to listen to that, they were nuts. The father was completely nuts. And he was passing that down to his child, which is another reason that we want to be able to be in charge of our fear rather than it being in charge of us. I have a fair number of Asian friends, and I'm hearing more and more about how people are acting really weird towards them now. And that's utterly irrational. You see a person who looks Asian on the street, and you act as if they're a plague carrier, as if they are Typhoid Mary. And even 2 moments of rational thought would tell you that that's crazy.
you've probably discussed this before I came online, but I would, at least in my experience, there are two things that sort of also play a major role in the fear. One is the unknown. You know,
Yes.
the fact that we don't know in detail what's happening with, in this case, the coronavirus, and is one of the things that certainly contributes to the fear. The more we know, and the less false information we get from things like Trump, helps out in that area. And the other, I guess, is preparation. And I'm not sure. Well, I mean, and that's presumably what some of these toilet people are trying to do in an irrational way, is to prepare for possible outcomes. I remember when I was in Cleveland, I was living in an Italian ghetto and had to walk to work at the university. And I was really nervous for a long time. And what finally helped a lot was by the time I got to my red belt in karate, I began to feel a hell of a lot better about it, So in that case was preparation, So it seems to me both of those factors play a major role, having reliable data, knowledge about what the hell's going on, and having basic preparation.
Yep. We touched on that, but it bears repeating. Okay. It really does. And that gets us to the most interesting part of this talk. What are people afraid of? Now, my old buddy Jed McKenna says, humans are fear-based beings. I have seen nothing to dissuade me from this argument. I am pretty sure that at the basis of every human being, when you dig down, you find fear. And what is the fear that you find?
In general, I'd expect fear of death and fear of pain.
Those are definitely two, but what's under those? Fear of death, fear of pain, fear of the unknown, those are the big ones, but there's something underneath all of that.
Being a temporal creature.
Say more about that.
That this is going to end sometimes.
What is going to end?
My existence.
Yes. Not so people make up stuff to protect themselves like that, like, oh, I'm going to go to a better place. I'm going to go to paradise, or I'm going to go to hell if you're a really bad person. But the I is still there. The ultimate human fear, as far as I can tell, is fear of no self, fear of non-existence, fear of the disappearance of the I. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think so. And once you confront that fear, then other fears become easier to deal with. I mean, think about it. What if you cease to exist? Do not go to heaven. Do not collect $200. Go directly to non-existence. What does that do to you inside? Can you even allow yourself to contemplate this? Your entire personality, everything that you call Zoha or Ilmar or Nancy, dissolves away, is no longer there. You no longer perceive yourself as I. You cease to exist. pretty grim, huh?
Well, of course, in a weird sort of way, some people claim that that's what they're after, that in fact they would love to see their sense of identity dissolve, you know. Oh, now they may be kidding themselves, that's another question, but you know, traditionally that's been one of the selling points of even things like the Advaita movement and stuff like that, you know.
Yep. And that's all well and good until the gun is to your forehead. And this is one of the things in the Yoga Sutras. You know, all of the things that you can be afraid of that get in your way, and the last of them is literally fear of death and non-existence. And Patanjali says this is the one that you don't overcome. I'll dig up the quote and post it to the forum for you. So I think that you will find it interesting.
And so I wonder whether some of these practices, I think even some of the initiation practices, which are kind of like little death, you know, where you sort of go through the experience of at least temporarily losing the sense of self. I wonder if that could be considered almost practice for dealing with this, which I agree is a very fundamental, in fact, maybe the fundamental fear, you know.
Yeah, and that's very likely true. It would not surprise me at all if that is the main reason for a lot of these initiations where they bring you to the terror of death.
And so do you think those methods succeed in doing that? Succeed in actually helping you deal with this fundamental fear?
I would have to say it depends. I think a lot of them, excuse me, do different things. A lot of that creates imprint vulnerability shock.
Right.
If I can bring you to the point where you think you're about to die, you're going to become vulnerable to taking a new imprint. And that's what most initiations do in my experience. But I think that it can be practice for, you know, transitioning through that point of no self.
Right. Yeah, I suspect you're right about that. You know. But I was just catching on chat, I think Brian's remark, that it's perhaps there's even something underneath the fear. I mean, what I find, at least, sometimes when we're dealing with a person, what's underneath all of that is still, well, as Brian would say, love or a connection or a...
If you cease to exist, then there is no connection. In order to have a connection, there has to be an I.
Mm.
So while I would say he is not at all wrong, you have to take that one thing into consideration, that if I fear loss of divine connection, it's because I fear loss of I.
Mm.
I am the one that has the connection.
Not necessarily. Well,
I'm speaking from the position of the ego at this moment.
Yeah, okay.
I should say.
Okay.
Got to clarify that one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the experience of no self is utterly shattering. Which is why some people who have taken too much LSD have not come back in as good a condition as we would like, because they were not prepared to experience that no self.
So I guess what we're looking at here is a workable path to overcoming fear. Seems to be a path that would lead to a sense, a familiarity with loss of self, which does not damage you, which is not
Yes.
over the top, right?
Yep.
Which, okay.
So you start with the small stuff, like being attacked by tigers
Or cats.
or cats.
Yes.
Yes. Giant cats.
And you deal with what? First, the breath control? Is that what
That's the first thing. And this, trust me, this comes in very handy. I can remember being in the hospital and I had just had surgery on a kidney and I developed septicemia, which kills more people than the kidney problem that I had. And I literally, I was actually very, very lucky because I was talking with the physician's assistant and the charge nurse at the time that it hit. And it literally just dropped me. And all I could do was lay there and breathe. And that kept me calm and composed while they were all panicking, trying to get IVs started with, huge amounts of antibiotics and stuff like that.
And you were able to do that presumably because you've been practicing that method for a while, right? I mean, it wouldn't be something you would spontaneously go to, right? I mean, this is
no. I have been practicing that for a while with less dire situations, and so it allowed me to actually get through that with a certain amount of calmness, and probably went towards keeping me safe because my heart rate didn't go through the roof, or my blood pressure didn't bottom out, or all of these things. I was able to keep my a lot of my responses more or less within the norms. I wasn't hyperventilating, which amazed the PA. He said he'd never seen somebody do that and not hyperventilate in terror. But, I just lay there and I prepared, to go through the bardos at that point. Because having, a medical background myself, I knew how dangerous it was. And I figured, oh, this could kill me. All right, let's prepare for this. And obviously, I got through it.
well, welcome back.
Why, thank you. That was a while ago. That was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, but almost 5 years ago now. Yeah.
To me, that speaks. I mean, again, here I am coming in late and jabbering away, but so shut me off whenever you want to. But to me, that speaks to the importance on the spiritual path of not only looking for sudden enlightenment, but also becoming a hell of a more capable of living life in the world of forms. And in particular, in this case, learning techniques like this breathing stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I know among some of my friends, at least, there's this thing, well, all of it doesn't matter. There's going to be this, you're either going to make it or not, and it's the rest is insignificant.
Well, I can tell you, interestingly enough, during that entire experience, at least for the time that I was conscious, I was never not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a point where I was like, oh, everything is good. The fear was always there.
Mm-hmm.
The fear was like anything else. It was like the pain. It was like, it was just another sensation.
And were you able to use that fear as a source of energy for something else, or were you just simply letting it out?
I think that I was using it as energy to stay alert.
Okay.
because I was pretty alert through the entire experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I was alert enough that I informed the PA. It was like I was listening to my own voice, and I said to him, you know, I feel like I'm slurring my words. And he listened to me and he said, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up spending an extra 2 days in the hospital, but the nurses were very nice and the food wasn't horrible. So
Cool.
so any more thoughts on fear?
Well, two. Oh, go ahead.
No. Go, Nancy.
Okay. One is, the first round where you asked people what they were afraid of and gave some advice on working into it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm afraid of is falling.
Okay. I would actually find there are courses for us senior citizen types on how to work on our balance, because fear of falling for you is rational. That's not an irrational fear.
Mm-hmm. My balance isn't too bad at the moment, and I don't think the classes are necessarily going to be open.
Yeah, this is something for the future, that you may not be able to deal with this tomorrow, but the
Okay.
plague is not going to go on forever.
True. Maybe I can practice, falling onto pillows or something.
Yeah, I would suggest practice strengthening your legs
Mm-hmm.
and strengthening your sense of balance.
Okay.
So one way that I have people do that is what's called the four corner balance drill, something that my buddy Scott Sonnen invented. And it's really quite good, and I think you can find it on YouTube. As a matter of fact, I will also post a link to it. I'll go and find it and post a link to it, or if I can't find it and post a link to it, I will make a video and put that up on the forum, because maintaining balance is really important, and that's one that you can do while you're holding on to something to start.
Mm-hmm.
But the stronger your legs are, and the more you practice your balance, the less likely you are to fall.
Yeah, and the other thing, this is going to sound weird, is I am not as frightened about the coronavirus as I suspect is reasonable. I mean, I bought some extra food and stuff, but I feel like I'm keeping my fear out of my consciousness.
Okay.
I don't know if this is anything that needs to be dealt with.
It's useful to ask yourself, how afraid am I actually?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so for me, I do this every day. It's like, how afraid am I about this? And so far, the answers has been, I'm not super afraid. My rational mind knows that even though I am in the most risk-prone group for this, I'm also ridiculously healthy for my age,
Mm-hmm.
and in better shape than a lot of people 20 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a decent chance of surviving. I also am, being fairly cautious. I'm not going out to movies or dining or anything like that. I'm pretty much staying home and watching Netflix and catching up on my reading and all of this sort of thing. But right now I can honestly say if we're going from green to yellow to orange to red, I'm down in the low yellow in fear.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have a rational fear. I would like to avoid catching the disease because, at my age, it would be no fun. And I'm all about the fun. So Zoha, your question.
So on what you quoted from Yoga Sutra,
Mm-hmm.
where it said that fear would always stay with you.
Mm-hmm.
And comparing that to the discussion you had last week with the 9 levels of the self,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean you still, if you're at the higher states, you still have the fear of losing the self?
No, but fear of death is in the body.
Yeah.
As long as you have a body, you are going to experience that fear. The body is going to be afraid regardless.
That's a good explanation.
Yeah, and that's what Patanjali was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, no matter what you do, the body is afraid to die. That's hardwired into the meat. And even the greatest of all the saints, their body is going to experience fear when they pass.
Do we know that to be true? Because according to some of the stories of these saints, like someone like what's his name, Maharshi, not Maharshi, claim that they witnessed the other way, but that somehow
Well,
their spiritual enlightenment overcame their body fear in some way.
Yeah, they're not inside the person who's dying.
Yeah, that's
The problem with this is that you have to ask the person after they're dead.
right.
And all I can go through is, well, first of all, the experience of my own senses. I've been around a fair number of people who have died as they were dying. And even the ones who intellectually and emotionally and spiritually were calm, their bodies were still upset. They still showed that fear response.
Mm.
But you as far as I can tell, you ride that like you ride anything else. So I expect that the really enlightened guys are going to allow that to happen and just not feed into it. It's identifying with the fear that gets you. So
it comes back, sounds to me like your ability to direct your attention, or your, not so much your attention, but what is it that feeds that when you really start feeding your fear? What are you really doing? You're putting your attention on, that's one of the things, but you're doing something more than that.
You're also identifying with the fear.
Identifying.
Yeah,
okay.
You're literally saying, I am afraid.
Gotcha. Yeah.
As opposed to what some of the Buddhists might say, which is, the ego that identifies itself as me appears to be afraid.
Yeah.
So, as with most things, the answer to dealing with fear starts with getting control of your breath. If you can get control of your breath, you can get control of other physiological responses. You can stop the cascade of responses that come from the limbic system and allow the cortex to participate in decisions that you need to make vis-a-vis what is scaring you. So that's basically it. Any last thoughts from anybody? Nope. Okay, well, I'm going to thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope that it was a useful talk for you. And I'm going to stop the recording, and we will see you next week.